What's going on, traders, and welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. Before we get going, I'd like to make your attention to the newsletter. If you're interested in receiving 5 to 10 swing trade ideas for the week, sign up at the first link in the description. It's completely free. It's actually risk-free to you. You might risk 5 minutes of your time, but if you're not interested and after you get the first one, you don't like it, whatever, you're welcome to unsubscribe. But again, no risk to you, 5 to 10 swing trades per week coming out on Sunday night. Without further ado, let's get into the analysis. We have the broad market as always with SPY, the Qs, and IWM. After that, we check out some companies. We have Apple, Netflix, Tesla, Alibaba, Facebook, NVDA, Microsoft, and Amazon. So jumping right into our SPY weekly chart, you can see we have a nice hammer here. If you're watching throughout the week, though, you know that was filled with gaps and whatnot, so not a very clean hammer. It's also poking down below our trend line, our support trend line from these 3 weeks here. So a little violation there, not the biggest deal. You can see we didn't even get into our weekly 50 SMA, so this wasn't really a crazy sell-off. The markets were down, yes. However, like I said, we didn't even get into the 50 SMA. We did find support here, and now we're moving back in the upwards direction. We did close, as you can see based on this weekly bar, above our resistance, since we were below it here at 293.99, 294. Which is a good sign. We're back above the balance here, so it should act as support on any sort of retest. Dropping it back down to the daily, though, you can see it might, just because we closed above it, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to hold above it with a candle like this. You can see the 50 SMA is coming down on it. It's sort of a big resistance zone in general right here at 294. So the market is pretty much going to be determined, the direction anyway, is going to be determined whether or not on Monday we break above and make a move to the upside, or we break down below and continue to sort of go in between our support trend line here and our resistance point here at 294. So keep that in mind early on in the week. It'll definitely set the tone for the week, whether or not we break above, like I said, come up to our next resistance here at 297, or stay down below and go back down and retest our support trend line. There's a baby gap here. You can see there's sort of a little tail, but it didn't close all the way, so there's still a small gap here on the chart that you should keep in mind. There is always the potential for the gap fill there. So the Qs had a little bit more of an interesting positioning here. You can see we're below the support trend line here, and that we're retesting, sort of back testing, if you will, the 50 SMA, our resistance zone from here, as well as now the back test of this support trend line. So this is a little bit more interesting than SPY, I think, just in the sense that there are more points here that would lead me to believe there could be some sort of pullback, the back test of this, the resistance, and the 50 SMA, as I just discussed, which then would give me a target, essentially, here of the gap fill, which is much larger here on the Qs than it is on SPY. So keep that in mind. That's one possible scenario here. The other is obviously that we break back into this zone and come up and retest our resistance trend line on the downside. That's this white dotted line here. So keep that in mind on the upside, any sort of move back into this triangle. On the pullback, again, we're targeting here. If you were watching, as we talked about, pretty much nailed all these bottoms here. Boom, right to our support here at 183 the next day. The next one we stopped at, it was 181, as we talked about. We never quite got into that 200 SMA or our lower one here, but those are definitely areas to keep in mind, if you will, on any sort of move back to the downside. IWM, the wild card, I'm leaving it a little zoomed out so you can just see how sideways this thing has gone, even though the market has essentially been up pretty much since sometime here back in March. So things to keep in mind: we're at the lower end of our essentially sideways channel, so look for a potential bounce here. It's already started on Thursday, Friday. I could see a target here of our moving averages. That would be a good upside target there. You can see we sort of got tangled up in that 200 on the back test of them when we started to move in the upwards direction here. So that could certainly be a good target. On the downside, if this breaks down, well, at first I'd like to see it act as support again. As you can see, we had support here, retested the moving averages, and then support again. So that's a potential scenario there as well. So 145 just about is a really important area on the chart. If that gives, things could get nasty. I'm going to zoom back out, and you can just see there's not a whole lot of structure there down below us. And the next possible support I could see, looks like a double bottom here, but that's all the way down at 136. So almost a $10 drop there if that support gives, and that's not even a really solid support. So take that with a grain of salt. Any sort of upward movement we talked about, moving averages, next one is the resistance trend line, and then this really tough resistance zone that it's really been struggling to get up and through, which is between 158 and 159. Alrighty, so Apple, the two scenarios that I had talked about in last week's video both came true. You can see early in the week we had a breakout up to our resistance point here, which was to the upside here, and then we fell back down below and got caught up in our support trend line, which held true, and then we have this big gap here on Friday essentially, and now we're back up at resistance. So pretty important area on the chart right now where we stand. Again, based on market context, I think if the market pushes upwards, we see a break of this and we move to the all-time high up here at 233.50 just about. However, if we see sort of that deterioration in the market and the market wants to draw back after that big advance there on Friday after the big drop, if that makes any sense, we will see more of a gap fill type scenario here. We have a little bit of a gap fill based on the tail of this candle, but a full gap fill back to this level here around 221 would put it back at a support zone. It would cool it off a little bit from the big gap. Things would sort of be going sideways for a bit, consolidating, if you will, and then another move to the upside if the market decides to go that way could be in store. On the downside, if this trend line breaks, we're looking to target the 50 SMA, this blue line here, which as the week moves up, I imagine it will start to coincide with this level here around 217, so keep that in mind as a critical support below, and that covers Apple. Netflix looks like it's sort of having a bit of a dead cat bounce here after the big sell-off and breakdown below this support here at 282. Now, interesting hammer there on Thursday. I didn't notice that, but just seeing it now, very interesting. Long tail and then a nice move upwards on Friday. So interesting to see there, sort of coinciding with the market. However, I think the next target is a back test of this zone. I think the next move is up here to 282.91 and then a rejection here, in which case you would get short on Netflix for a target of at least 268 and then coming all the way back down here. Again, I've talked about it time and time again. I don't think the fundamentals of the company are there. I think with all the competition that's coming into this sector, essentially the streaming business, Netflix is sort of just going to crumble a little bit and, decline. Tesla, big gap down with the market there on Thursday, but you can see the two hammers right around a support zone, so that's interesting to see. The next move here, in my opinion, is if we can get back above this 50 SMA, the blue line, instead of having this indecision around it, then I think the next move is a retest of this big high in here. If we can get an equal high around 247.82, then it would be the knocking on the door pattern, as I like to call it. Just all these touches with the support steadily increasing below, getting higher, if you will, forms an ascending triangle, and then the breakout above this level, 250 I'd call it, just to play a nice round number there. The breakout above there would be nice and strong with all this pressure mounting below it. So if that breakout happens, I'd target at least up here to the swing high through the 200 SMA. If we get a breakdown though, our supports are mapped out. We have 219.42 and then 211.36 below us. Anything lower than that sort of brings us back down to 177.50 based on my chart, and that's kind of a little ways away, but very possible with the way Tesla is. BABA, again, no surprises here, just sort of following the market, but interesting spot right in between the 200 and the 50 SMA here, so it's sort of pinching depending on which way it breaks out, either above the 50 SMA or back down below the 200 will dictate, again, sort of like SPY, what the tone of the week is going to be. If it breaks out above, then again, this seems like a good target up here at 179.37, where we did have our knocking on the door pattern. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, all these touches in here, fake breakout. So I would say another move up there could be in store. Maybe a lower high, actually, now that I think of it, to somewhere in here, in this zone around 177. A lower high could form and then another leg down. So on any move down, we have our support down here at 168 and then our rising support trend line, which comes from quite a long time ago. Actually, it's a symmetrical triangle here. You can see touch 1, 2, and if we get back down into it, that would be 3. So keep that in mind. Facebook looks similar, except the moving averages are slightly different. The 200 offered some support. We'd got a little fake break down below it on Wednesday, but now back above it and nice and strong. A hammer, very similar to BABA, similar in size and stature, but the 50 SMA is not above it, so I'd say there's more room and more likelihood for it to move to the upside and come and test that area. If it comes back up, 50 SMA is coming into play slightly before our resistance here at 187, so keep that in mind on the move up. If it does break through, then we have 191.20, which I would imagine offers some strong resistance just based on all these touches here, so keep that in mind on the upside. The downside, 200 SMA should be coinciding with this 176.68 level as the week carries forward, so that should be a very strong support on any side of move to the downside. If it gives, though, we do want to see 173 this support level here hold. After that, it's sort of down into the Netherlands here at 160. All right, so good to see here. We got the back test. This is essentially the back test I was talking about here in last week's video. We had the back test of the resistance trend line coming down, coinciding with the 50 SMA support. Good thing to see. Now we're continuing in the upwards direction. This essentially confirms the breakout to the upside of the overall longer term symmetrical triangle. You can see there the consolidation as it comes down. So the breakout to the upside is more than likely now that we've confirmed support on the back test. Next target here is the swing high, right around 188.40. If we break through that, we have resistance at 192.95, so 193 just about to keep in mind. On the downside, we want to see all of these hold up now that we are above them and strongly above them. That's 173, and then the 50 SMA is going to be sort of our saving grace if any sort of negative news or reaction from the market comes out and pushes NVDA lower. So keep that 50 SMA, really important level in mind. Microsoft, someone in the comments had mentioned a put trade on Microsoft, which I could totally see. Right now we are getting a back test of the support trendline 50 SMA. We are through it. So keep that in mind. I think the overall uptrend is really strong, so you should be super cautious if you do make a put play here. It's at all-time highs, so I'd keep a stop. Anything above here, and I would be out of the trade for sure. This would be a longer time frame trade. There's divergences on the RSI that he had pointed out. Great eye there, great charting vision. So again, make sure you have enough of a target, enough meat on the bone. I'd target somewhere in here on any sort of major pullback, right around 120, based on this low here. So if you think that this is the top of Microsoft, I'd target at least here with a stop somewhere up here to make sure your risk versus reward is right. So I hope that's helpful if you're watching this video. To whoever was thinking about that trade plan. So, however, in the shorter term, again, I'd be more concerned with what's happening here on the back test of the support trend line. If we get rejected, we're looking to come back down and form a low here that will sort of form equal lows, and then if it gives, we can then target our next support down below at 130.67. That one gives, then we're looking at the 200 SMA as that starts to rise, and 123 if that gives. So those are my thoughts there. If it gets back into the symmetrical triangle, then the breakout point would be above here at 141.48, in which case, again, $1.50 on the way up since we're in blue skies. Amazon came so close to just fulfilling the prophecy that I've been laying out for the past few weeks now. We were only about $10 off of the target here at 16.72. So great to see that the move to the downside did happen. Now it's recovering back here. So look for the back test here. If we get some selling signals, aka some inverted hammers, some dojis around this now resistance level, then it could be a potential short again on the back test there for another move back down to come all the way to 16.72. However, if we break back through, again, moving averages are sort of going to be pinching here. Keep that in mind. That's going to offer a lot of resistance on any sort of move to the upside. 200 SMA, 50 SMA as they converge here just about. And then obviously if it breaks through to the upside, we have 1833. And then again, I'm not really focusing on this 1950 level since we did have the breakdown here. And I think the chances of it coming and shooting all the way up there are very, very low. So that's Amazon. That's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. Again, if you're interested in receiving 5 to 10 swing trades per week, then sign up in the first link in the description, completely free. The newsletter goes out on Sundays. With that, if you enjoyed the video, leave it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, want to see me review any certain stocks, let me know in the comments section, and as always, subscribe. I wish you a green trading week.